The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give about 60 seconds for the last few folks that are just logging in to get connected with us. So we'll be beginning at just about 1:01. I'll be right back then. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to today, our fourth presentation on best practices between the Transfinder and NYAPT in partnership. This is going to be a bit of a progress report with our back to school work group. My name is Andrew Hamilton, and I'm just going to give a few introductory words to today's presentation. Now, we want you to take advantage of the fact that this is an interactive learning session here. So in order to communicate with us while we are making our presentation, please look to your GoToWebinar control panel to the questions section. If you have any questions or concerns as this presentation goes on, you can use the questions section to share any of that with us. I'll be keeping an eye on that, and Rick DeRico on our end, who's managing the conversation, he's going to be keeping an eye on that as well to try to share questions with panelists, or I may type in a response as we go on. Now, with that being said, let's move on with our actual content for the day. We're going to begin with a few words from the president and CEO from Transfinder Corporation, Tony Civitella, and he's going to then transition us over to the introduction of today's panelists for our presentation. And I think that's all that I have to say for today. So, Tony, everybody's all warmed up and ready for you.
That's great, nice and warm. It wasn't too warm here a couple of days ago. We actually got a little bit too aggressive. We started planting some stuff here, and some plants didn't having a hard time during the weekend. We had some frost, a little bit of white stuff. I don't even know what that is anymore in May, but thank you for the intro. It's warming up, and I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. This is amazing what's going on here. I'm really part of this best practice as we begin really what's going on here after COVID-19. It's, you know, at this point we're already planning. This is our, as Andy said, it's our fourth webinar here, part of the best practices series with NYAPT. It's excited about that. And you're going to be hearing from the co-chairs of the NYAPT Back to School Work Group, Rich Gallagher from all the way down to Long Island. I'm sure it's about 10 degrees warmer than it is from here. And Bill Harvey from Western New York. I always call him to find out what's the weather going to be here next 2 hours. So that's always great. Of course, along with Dave Christopher, part of the, he's obviously the NYAPT Executive Director here locally. And of course, he'll share the committee's progress. And also today, we're going to be talking again, Theresa Anderson, all the way from Colorado. I'm not sure if it's warm or cold, but I'm sure she'll tell us how the weather is while we're talking to her. But really, she's going to talk about these special insights, how to approach opening school with special needs students in mind. So how we're gonna treat that, how we're gonna do our routing at that point. So these are interesting time. It's all about communication. We say something about here at Transfinder that you can't over communicate. It's very important. A couple months ago, probably some of you guys actually took up the offer that we're giving away StopFinder. It's a communication app that is for your community, that we made it available for the rest of the school year. Well, the school's not reopening. So we want to extend that offer to the rest of the calendar year, right through December 31st. This is a time to actually use that product. Again, it's free. You don't have to be a client of ours. It's a communication tool. So this is the time to communicate with your community and really your parents. And by the way, some people are actually using this two-way communication, even internal, within their employees and their staff. So cool things. If you're interested, free, stop finder at transfinder.com, but you'll hear more about it. I just want you to know that we've extended that offer because schools are clearly not going to come back. And we want you to benefit from the over communicating, because that's important. And you guys will hear that more and more, of course, about that. Clearly, we're honored. Dave, thank you for the opportunity to partner with you guys on getting this information out to the community. And obviously, I know it's just focused mainly in New York State, but we're going to have people attending really all over the country because everyone's looking at each other. It's not just each area, but everyone's looking at what they're doing. Just like you see on TV and how the states are reopening, they're all looking at each other. So I know it's a regional, it's only New York, but I'm positive other states are watching you guys and see what's going on. So I'm look forward to hearing from the panelists. And again, this best practices, I want to make sure that you guys know this is being recorded. There's an area which is just massive off our website at transfinder.com of all these recordings that we've done past couple months, I think, at this point. So again, I want to stop talking. I want to turn it over to Dave. Dave, thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity, of course, and looking forward to hearing today's topic. Thank you again.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for the opportunity to do this every other week with Transfinder. It's certainly a great service you're providing the industry, and we certainly appreciate it here at NYAPT, and I know our members do. We get a lot of favorable feedback from these webinars, so thank you very much. And also, we want to thank Rick, who's doing a great job for us, trying to moderate and get us all organized. That's a big chore, I'm sure. So I want to just give you a little background on the work group. A couple weeks ago, President Sweeney asked to form a group to task force, if you will, to study and collect information on the process and the issues of returning to school post COVID-19 and post closure of all of our schools for the past several months. So we put together a panel of about 25 people from all across the state, and we're collecting information. We've met 2 times. Thank you, Ron Mackey, for putting together a great Google Doc system where the committee people can put information in there at any time, and that's starting to fill up quite handily. So it's a good process. We've got information from a lot of people from all across the state, and it's starting to take shape. The plan is to put this information together in such a format that it can be shared with members of the industry and available. At this point, it's raw data, so that we will not share it at this point until we get it collated and cleaned up, which will be soon, and we'll let you know when that's done. So I want to move on to today's presentation. We're going to spend a few minutes quickly going over the information that we've collected to date, at least some of it. We haven't got it all on this PowerPoint that we're about to show you, because that would take a good part of the hour. We want to have time for conversation as well. So Rich Gallagher from Bayshore Schools, past president NYAPT and current safety committee chair, will lead us through that conversation. Bill Harvey's here. You all know Bill from the last webinar. He's here also. Bill and Rich are the co-chairs of the committee, and they'll lead the way today. We also invited Theresa Anderson from Anderson Consulting. As Tony said, she's from Colorado. She's a Region 5 director with NYAPT, and also involved in the former director, very involved in special needs education and consulting as well. So Theresa is, we spoke for quite a while yesterday. She's quite a resource. We appreciate that she's here. So Rich, if you could sign on, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we'll start your part of the presentation. And Rich again will speak for about 10-15 minutes going over the slides, and then we'll reconvene everybody and have kind of an open session for discussion. So Rich, I'm going to sign off and it's all yours. Oh, your audio's off. Your audio's off, Rich. Nothing yet. Can you hear me now? Andy, if you could put the PowerPoint up, I could start it until Rick gets his IT problem solved there. Yeah, it looks like you still got an audio problem. So I'll start off just in the interest of time, Rich, as soon as you're able to get audio, just hop on. The committee quickly created a mission statement based on, the very first conversation we had, and that basically was to provide information to the industry, try to a roadmap, if you will, to resume transportation operations in the COVID-19 area and beyond. One of the things that we're really working on is to try to understand what this is going to be like beyond opening school in September. We all tend to focus on all the things that need to be done when school opens, and what we're going to try to do is try to project, if you will, beyond September. So that's an important part. So that's kind of the mission of the committee, and the information that we're collecting hopefully reflects that. So next slide, please, Andy. So these are some of the general categories that we focused on: staff safety, student safety, bus equipment, bus stop safety, bus capacity, cleaning, sanitizing, HR issues, PPEs, regulatory compliance, special education, and routing. So these were kind of the big buckets, if you will, of information that we created to put the issues in as they come up. So we're trying to use this as kind of an organizational tool. If you could go to the next slide, please, Andy. So under student safety, these are some of the examples of issues that were identified. Use of personal protective equipment and compliance of that equipment. Social distancing on the bus, how do we make it happen? We're really kind of decided there is no such thing on a bus, and I think we've amended that based on a conversation that we had late yesterday afternoon. We really may be talking about managing density versus social distancing. So the one thing to keep in mind with this whole project is it's a project that continually evolves. None of these issues will be cast in stone, and we certainly have to be flexible. Rich, do you have sound now?
I hope so.
There you go. You're on. You're on. So if you want to take this over in the student safety slide, I'll back away.
Which one are you on?
I just went over social distancing on the bus.
Okay. The third thing is, will temperature checks prior to boarding be required, and who will do them? Reduce density at bus stops. We all know we're not going to be able to have as many at a bus stop. Proper cleaning and disinfecting of buses. One thing that came up was dwell time, how long it takes for your chemicals to dry so it's safe to use the bus. Safe loading, unloading of buses. Social distancing. Filling the rear seats first toward the front. We all know for safety, we always like middle loading, but now we have to consider loading from the rear. Impact these new processes will have on special education student population. Those are some of the things we considered there. Under bus staff, we talked about availability and proper use of PPEs, use of face masks, gloves, and face shields. And it was interesting that Ted gave us some information about the length of time you can wear a mask without having CO2 problems. Something else for you to consider. Temperature checks, we talked about that briefly. Who's going to do the, and do you temperature check your drivers, monitors, and attendants as a staff member? Protocols for notification of positive cases. Under garage staff, mechanic social distancing in the garage, shop area tool cleaning and disinfecting, PPEs for shop personnel. Do you run multiple shifts to reduce the density? How do you assure buses are disinfected before repairs? In other words, how do we protect the mechanics from getting in a bus that might be infected? How will you handle parts delivery, sales calls, all the things that normally people enter your shop on a daily basis to provide the shop services while you're in operation? For your transportation office, we talked about elimination, reduced size of the lounge area. This would reduce the amount of people that are hanging out. How do you handle large-scale training? Do you do distance learning? Is that going to be allowed? That sort of thing. Coaching sessions with supervisors, where do you do them? How far apart are the people? And do you do them on a bus? Do you do them in an office? You have to make those decisions. Check-in process with the dispatcher. Is that going to go the way it's always gone, or is it going to have to be modified? Cleaning and disinfecting category. Who will do the cleaning and disinfecting? How often? Once a day, in between tiers, in between trips. What's going to be the requirement? What are you going to set up as your policy and your procedures? Deep cleaning versus touching up high traffic areas, and cleaning supplies. We're going to go through a lot more cleaning supplies, so what are your considerations there? Training considerations. More online training for drivers, monitors, and attendants. Under routing, school site loading and unloading issues, the need for high skill routing personnel to create multiple scenarios so that you can advise your district on the best way to do these things. Flexibility. School schedules may change in response to the pandemic spikes. Adjust routes to respond to social distancing. Will the number of bus routes increase or decrease? Most likely they're going to increase. And can we handle those? Will route times be longer due to cleaning requirements and loading and unloading delays? Are you going to be able to unload 5, 6, 7 buses at a facility at the same time, or are you going to have to do it bus by bus? And what times are you going to add to your routes for that? Should parents be asked to apply for transportation services? We all know that they're allowed, or it's a service that we must provide them, but we need to consider some way of getting to know or getting a better count on the number of people we will be providing service for. Early decision on instructional schedule to plan routes needed. In other words, you have to be involved in the process at the beginning. Equipment, do we retain buses scheduled for retirement in case of need? We've talked about maybe additional routes. Do we need to keep the equipment that we were planning on getting rid of and keep that in case you need additional routes? Do we adapt the bus schedule, the bus, to enhance driver safety? Sneeze guards, people have talked about curtains in the bus between the seats. All these things would take a long time to get approved. They'd have to go through the OEMs and go through crash testing. So even though that's something we need to keep an eye on, it's not something for the immediate future. Can we improve air circulation on the buses? This is one of Dave's high items. We all know that this air gets static in the bus. You can smell it when there's been a lot of people on the bus for a long period of time. It was brought up yesterday, maybe we need to talk about changing the filters on the heating system more often, or on the heaters. Maybe we need to put fans in the roof vents, or a whole bus fan. So we need to look at things that could improve air circulation on the bus. Under state compliance, we all know we have SED, DOT, and DMV requirements that we have to comply with. Right now, they're almost all on hold. How do we catch up? What is going to be our plan? What are you going to do to get everything up and make sure all their files have something noted as to why they were late in doing the procedures? Staffing issues. Will we see staffing shortages or surpluses? Will at-risk staff choose not to come back? So 65 and older. I think one person said the other day that 40% of their staff are in that category. Are they going to come back? Are they not going to come back? And with DMV not doing road tests, are we going to have enough drivers to replace them? How will the extension of the school day affect driver attendance with other commitments? A lot of our drivers work second jobs. How is that going to affect their ability to work a longer day if we go to split sessions or something along that line? I just mentioned this, DMV closed for months. CDL licensing has been delayed. Additional bus runs equal the need for more drivers. During pause, drivers may have moved on into other driving jobs. The trucking industry is looking for drivers. I don't know how many people we may have lost to other industries. And how possible budget cuts affect staffing. All these things we're talking about cost more money, but they're talking about the budgets decreasing. We've also talked about some next steps, organize information for ease of use and to readily update, identify what we can do now versus what we need direction on. The things that we can do now, we want to get started on. In other words, buy cleaning supply, buy masks, buy PPEs, buy those things and get ready for everything that we can do now, because no matter what happens and when we start, you're still going to need these things. Provide information to members and other interested party. This is fluid. Things are going to change. Make sure you're able to adapt and change your program based on what you hear and what you're told. We plan on writing a white paper for ongoing advocacy efforts and to give to the members so that they have something that they can use with their administration. And just think of this as a marathon, not a sprint. Let's be smart and take a steady pace, but get started. We will continue reviewing the situation as things change and as we get more information. And we'll do that through the NYAPT Safety Committee. So be a leader. You're the most knowledgeable person in your school district on transportation matters, and lead the conversation. Don't let it come to you. You have to go out and lead this conversation, because if you let it come to you, you're going to get things told to you that you don't want to hear. So these have all been things to think about. And I asked the rest of the panel to come on and Rick to talk to us and we'll answer any questions that we can as we go along. Thank you. Rick? Rick, you're muted.
We've been having some IT problems today with our technology, probably user-based. Oh, Rick just paused. Still can't hear you, Rick. Well, folks, I just want to comment that, Bill, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just want to comment that the to the group attendees that PowerPoint was probably a quarter of all of the issues that were presented by the work group. We couldn't begin to lay all of that information out in a PowerPoint today, or that's all we would talk about. So that will be, again, cleaned up and collated and available to all of you. The plan is to identify the issues. At this point in time, the committee is working on resolutions or recommendations or follow-ups to those issues, and those will be again put in order so that it makes good reading for folks, so that you can use that information. None of those recommendations, if you will, or solutions, potential solutions, are cast in stone. The idea here is to just put thoughts on paper so that you folks can make your own decisions locally, because it's a very diverse state. What happens in one part of the state may not apply in another part. So we're trying to be flexible with that. So we lost Rick again, and we've lost Bill Harvey.
No, Bill's over here.
Bill, you have no audio.
So is this audio working? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, Theresa.
Okay.
And I can hear Rich, but we lost Rick and I don't hear Bill.
I was going to add, just real quick, if you hear a very that are doing kind of a sweep of the metro area for all of the first responders and all of that stuff. And of course, it's the first time out of the 3 different passes that they've done that they actually go over my house, and here we are on this. So just if it sounds for a long time like a war film, it's a good possibility it's going to be. I just got an update about it, so I just wanted to add that.
Oh, thank you. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
All
You're
right.
good now, yes.
Theresa, thank you for stalling. That's what you did right there. You rock. All right. Well, before we get started, I want you to all, and I'm just going to go Theresa, David, Rich, and Bill. Why don't we just go through the line, just introduce yourselves a little bit, and also a little caveat here. If you could talk a little bit about how you and maybe your organization has had to adapt during this time of this pandemic. So Theresa, you want to kick it off?
Okay, so thank you again, Transfinder and NYAPT, for inviting me to participate in this. As Dave said, I'm from Colorado. However, I do consulting throughout the nation. So it's been very interesting to see and hear how people are preparing. I really am impressed to see these steps being taken, because there are a lot of states who, I don't know if they're not sure where to start or kind of in denial. I think we're all in denial to a certain amount. And so this, I think, can also help with that footprint and that road print for the STARTS group that's going to be coming through the national different organizations. I know, as he had said, your governor is looking at things a little differently. Ours over here, they haven't announced a whole lot, especially being a purple state on that they're really talking about hybrids here. So that's going to be even yet another interesting thing. But unfortunately, a lot of the discussions still have not come to how they're going to get there when they do get there.
Great. David?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of unknowns in New York as well, and not a lot of direction. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do now that we know are going to be in place. And I think the goal or the direction we should take is focus on those things that we know we can do now and try to address those. For instance, we're pretty confident we're going to be using PPEs. So, let's identify what kinds work well for people and get those purchased, for instance. We know we're probably going to be looking at some different routing schemes. So, make sure you have somebody in your operation that's a routing, I'm saying a routing expert, because you may be having to put together 3 or 4 or 5 different routing schemes throughout the year. And you want to make sure you're up to speed on that. Those are the kinds of things I think we know we can do now, along with many, many others. And then the things that we don't know, we'll have to tackle as they come along. And I think that's the best way to approach it at this point in time.
Great. Rich.
Yeah, we've been having meetings at the school district to talk about how we're going to proceed. I mean, during the school year, we've been feeding the people and we've been handing out laptops and things like that so that students can continue to learn. And we do usually have a summer feeding program that will probably continue, but I've been told that we're not going to have summer schools. They've made that decision. So we know we're not going to be transporting anybody probably at the earliest in September, but that's still up for discussion. So I continue to plan. I look at contracts, make sure we're going to be able to have a contract in place that'll allow our students to be transported properly. I look at the routing, make sure I'm set up for that, and I have all the students entered. So that's where we're at, and continue to discuss things with our contractor. It's nice when you have a district operation and you're considering everything yourself, but when you have to consider the options and discuss it with the contractor, it puts another layer in there.
That's great. Well, one of the things that keeps coming up over and over again, and Dave, you kind of alluded to it, with these things changing all the time, is the need to be flexible, flexible and adaptable. That you set your plan, but that plan, just like a battle plan, they always say, usually doesn't survive that first shot. And that's probably still the case in terms of the transportation and operation as well. You make your plan, and then I want to start off with, this is something that came from Governor Cuomo's press conference yesterday, just highlighting the uncertainty of our times. He says he was responding to a question about the fact that California colleges were going was it UCLA? It's going to actually not open this fall. They're going to wait until January of 2021. And he was asked about, what does that mean for New York? Do you see that happening here? And so he answers, where are we going to be in September? I don't know. I don't know where we're going to be in August. I'm still trying to figure out June. I understand schools need time to plan. And then he comes back again and mentions, I'm respectful. Can someone be on mute? I think I hear some sort of feedback. I'm respectful of the time the schools need to actually plan, but I am not ready to say that we should be doing September school in September. So when you hear that, especially the guys in New York, but Theresa, please jump in as well. How does that make you feel panicky about the future, or does it make you feel like we're all kind of in the same boat together and we're all figuring it out, or do you feel maybe a little bit of both? And anybody can answer that as you see fit.
Well, I'm going to say we are all in the same boat, regardless of where we're at. And these are the forums to try to help expand our network and share our ideas so that there is a commonality. Because we can never be pit against one another, which does unfortunately happen. But these type of things are definitely give us that right direction to get going.
Good.
I was going to say, I think we need to plan anyway. It doesn't matter whether the plan goes into effect in September, or whether it goes into effect in December or January. The planning is still the same. It's just a matter of when we implement it. So let's not wait. Let's get the plan ready and be ready to start it.
Well, I think one of the things, go ahead, David, thoughts? I don't know where we lost Bill. I think he might be trying to get back on, but David?
Yeah, Bill, we did lose Bill, and he's trying to get back on. He's texting me here. He can't get back on the webinar. So I don't know, Andy, if there's something we could do there. I'd appreciate it.
Actually, I've been trying to monitor the situation from the background, so folks may have been hearing a little bit of voice, like a little, like a woman almost on TV in the background there. That appears to be Bill. So Bill, I don't know if you can hear us, but it sounds like we can hear your background. In the meanwhile, what I'm going to advise, and it looks like some of you have means of being able to reach out to Bill better than I can, because I've been trying to chat with him in the GoToWebinar. It doesn't seem to be working. But it looks it looks like he just muted himself. So he appears to have access to his GoToWebinar control panel. So it looks like he can mute himself. Theoretically,
we'll
be able to make
we'll monitor that. But thanks. And again, we got to be flexible, right? So this is a flexibility on display, everybody. It's not always going to be perfect, but sometimes you guys have experience. Have you ever experienced that in your jobs? What didn't go exactly as planned, but you got the job done?
Every day.
Exactly. We just roll with it. No pun intended.
Oh, that's great. That's a great one. David, I'm sorry, you were getting ready to say something.
Yeah, so I think, I think everybody understands that. I think in our business, you have to be flexible, and there are no black and whites. It's just a gray area, and it's even more so now because there's so many unknowns. And I think that, we have to understand that the safety of kids comes first come September, and if we can't open and roll, then we don't. And, we have to do the best we can. What's happening to Bill's a perfect example of why, we have to try to get some stability, because I'm sure there's as many kids out there who are trying to log on and do their online work and having troubles just like Bill is having trying to get in. So, hopefully we'll get some solutions to this, but it's a different world we're in, and we have to roll with that.
One of the great things, though, having this, I don't want to say downtime, but we are used to going through our data at this time of year. I'd like to think of it somewhat as the election years, because I know in our areas, we always plan for what we think is going to happen. Then we're asked to plan for what they are potentially going to be going in a direction. Again, we're kind of the experts in that. I don't know how many times we would get everything set up according to what they said. Did the dangle the transportation as the carrot for the election? They go through and cancel everything, but we had been involved for so long, we knew the political pressure was not going to work. So actually having everybody do two sets of plans. So that's where kind of right now is a really good time also to get caught up on training on your systems. So we're so many people were out driving, much less, being able to get caught up, making sure that their data is clean or anything else. This is that opportunity to really go through, fine tune. Do we know our systems that well? If you don't have systems, there are offers out there. I know that Tony had mentioned on there for some tools that they're giving to help alleviate some of these pressures. This is a great time to start playing with these. Learn how to set up scenarios, those what ifs, because they're all over the place.
That's great. That's actually a great, you can squander this almost, I don't want to call it a gift, but there's this time that we have that maybe we may never get again. And we are hearing more and more. I mean, look at our attendance to these webinars. It's because there's a time that we would never probably do this in the middle of a day. Are you kidding me? Of a school day? So, Bill, welcome back. I had my own issues, by the way, so it's good to have you back.
I'm sorry if I may have created some feedback there. I tried getting on with my phone and then had to get off, so I apologize.
No, nothing to apologize for. We all talked about the need to be flexible, and you were
That's right.
That was a test. You were testing us, actually. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've had to adapt in the midst of this pandemic, and then I want to ask a very specific task force question. Rich, you raised a question that people are already asking about regarding summer school, so I do want to get to that. But Bill, a little bit about who you are and how you've adjusted.
Yeah, well, I've been in the transportation business for 35, 36 years as a head mechanic and of late a driver because of the driver shortage, but I'm the transportation director, and I also work as a security director for the school, so I have all the safety responsibility of maintaining emergency response plan and safety. So that dovetails in nicely to, obviously, this event, this pandemic keeps me very busy working on both of those fronts. So I was honored to have NYAPT ask me to co-chair this committee with Dave, and it's important work, and I'm working on it here. I'm a spectator. I watched the guys, Brad and Jim, on Tuesday and the great work they're doing. And I'm working with my own department as well, planning. So I will share a comment with you that it seems, I've spent a lot of time working and looking through the CDC regulations and recommendations for various different vocations and settings as far as how to deal with COVID and return. I've looked at the New York State guidelines. The only thing, I also looked at Capital Region BOCES put together an excellent guidance document that they released on May 1st. And that was the only document, the Capital Region BOCES, that mentioned anything about pupil transportation. So from the CDC perspective, I think we're in a position where we have to find like vocations. And they list multiple, everything from like food delivery, Uber drivers, taxi cab, rail, every type of operator except school or pupil transportation. So it's just interesting. I bring that up because there's a void there. And I see that as part of our work, is to help provide information that may fill that void.
That's great.
And kind of that Bill had said, and kind of our downtime, thinking of this is also that time to gather that information and how we said safety and recommendations. So going into whenever it is returned, we're going to have to be ready to know about latex allergies on our staff and our children. When we were kind of discussing this before, it's so hard to see that what we're going to be transporting, and especially our vulnerable transportations in there in immune problems and stuff, we really are going to have to be amping that up. So there needs to be those communications going back and forth, with our staff right now. And a lot of our staff, as Richard had said, we're not sure if they're going to be returning. They could have found a little bit more lucrative position during this time off. I know quite a few people with the CDLs, that was pretty much in demand to help transport things. They may be retained. A lot of our drivers also are a little bit older. Are they going to need additional recommendations? So it also is going to come down to masks. I know we talked about that the other day. Can you breathe with them? Can you be on there for 8 hours? Your students, how are they going to react?
I had about 3 or 4 questions specifically on CO2 concerns and how long can you wear a mask? I mean, I don't know if we have all the answers to that. Yesterday, we discussed different types of masks that allow the CO2 to come out. And so these are all things that are still, we're still feeling our way through. One thing I do want to say, and then Rich, I want to highlight something that you said earlier, but you are the experts. We talked about this yesterday during our, pre-meeting, the importance of encouraging people. And Dave, I'll let you talk about it because you said it strongly yesterday, but that in the transportation offices, you are the experts, and to kind of take that mantle and be willing to go into leadership and be making recommendations and not be passive, but be trust in the expertise that you've garnered over the years in your role, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's probably nobody in your school district or your community that is as knowledgeable as you are in terms of school transportation services. It's not like truck driving. It's not like Uber driving. It's a very unique business. So I would encourage everybody to learn as much as they can about these issues that surround the return to work process, resuming school transportation services, whatever you want to call it. Get on our webinars, get on the national webinars. They do an excellent job. Read the trade magazines and start formulating your plan. And it doesn't have to be a formal PowerPoint, beautiful thing. It could be just a checklist of things that you're going to need to do to resume services in whenever, and trust yourself. You probably have some, you probably have some good information. Share it with your superintendent, share it with your business official. They may reject it. That's their job to make decisions, and we all understand that. But don't let that slow you down if you've got a thought, a concern, or an idea. And when you look at some of the things we talked about on the PowerPoint under student safety, for instance, or staff safety, your superintendent may say, no, I don't want to do that. But at least put it out there, because they may not even consider it. They may not even understand that it's a consideration that you need to think about. So trust your instincts.
So thank you. That's great, David. So Rich, you set up a little bit of a firestorm in our questions section about summer school. And the question was about, is this general ed? Is this Bayshore? Or do you know something about New York State in general? Questions about no summer school.
Well, no summer school. I know for Bayshore, it's not going to be transporting students to a building. If we have any summer school at all, it's going to be distance learning through BOCES.
This is Bayshore, not a state. This is not an inside scoop on the state.
It's Bayshore. But if you stop and think about it, the governor's talking about maybe we won't be going back in September. So if he's thinking about not going back in September, what's the chances of going back in July? Just food for thought.
That's good.
Rich, can I add to that?
Yeah, please do.
And I do want to say that it depends on the region of the state that you're in.
Okay.
I'm down here on Long Island, and we have many more concerns since education's in phase 3 of the reopening plan. We're not even getting close to phase 1 down here. And I know Bill has different thoughts upstate. So I'll turn it over to Bill.
So I think, and that's the key point, Rich, that I wanted to bring up, is that New York State is so diverse with its settings, and certainly diverse with the degree of the pandemic. And the governor and the different regions that he has established across New York State have teams in charge of monitoring the metrics and allowing, reopening and additional activities moving through phases 1, 2, 3, and 4 as the metrics dictate. So I know Rich has a very good grip on his region. In our region, I can tell you there's a lot of energy around possibly having summer school. We're currently meeting the metrics. We open tomorrow. We go into phase 1 tomorrow. So I do think we all need to keep in mind that depending on where you are and your region, this is going to come to a point where all this reopening activity will to some extent depend on the region. That's the way the governor's got it set up. So very much metrics driven.
Good. And someone mentioned, John mentioned that education is actually in phase 4. Is that correct?
That's correct. Education is in phase 4. And interestingly, if you look at the governor's breakdown of the different industries, they have guidance for every single industry with precautionary measures to be taken and et cetera. But they have not yet written the phase 3 or 4 recommendations. So, we can't get a sneak peek at them because I really don't think they know what they are yet. Phase 1 gives you great insight. If you were to go on to the governor's webpage and look at this COVID situation in phase 1 reopening, it begins to paint a picture. And I think much of that will carry through phase 2, 3, and 4.
Very good. Thank you so much, Bill. See, it was so valuable to get you back on. So
I'm glad I made it.
Theresa, I want to touch base on a couple of things that we discussed yesterday, and everybody can jump in, but I want to point these to you for starters. The idea here of assigned seating, because everyone keeps asking, and this is obviously a very valid question, and it was raised in the slide, can you social distance on a bus? Assigned seating and the importance of attendance, taking attendance, or possibly something to consider. So can you walk us through a little bit of the assigned, these two areas, assigned seating and attendance?
Absolutely. This kind of goes back to also during this downtime. This is your opportunity to go through and get to know your fleet. You need to know what every configuration is. I'm not sure if your operations are very similar to ours. It's like we have all of one bus and all of a sudden we get a whole new set. So having at your disposal, knowing exactly what the configurations are. And then I don't know if a lot of people have noticed that picture that's floating around. I know STN also had it on their website from Bob Morse had put it up to where they showed the interior, and on the passenger side shows the number 1 with red tape around it. But then the second seat has a big red X. So the theory that I've been hearing for most is doing some type of seating practice that way. So, your average, from what I understand, is about 11 to 12 students that you can do that from. But then we were also kind of trying to look and see to expand, because again, with routing being more of my background, I'm always thinking, how can I get turned around and do more going to that? So we're also taking a look at, so that second seat where there was the red X, what if you were to take purple, just for lack of color, and put a number 1 in that and an X on the number 1 seat with red? At least theoretically, after you do your first run, you could turn around then and utilize those other seats. So at least you're not having to figure out, how can I turn around? And, another thing we have to plan for is, how are we going to clean these buses? We talked yesterday, again, especially with special needs, we have to be very careful. I hear of people doing foggers. I've seen a lot of people out there with a spray bottle. Those could leave residue, and I think Bill can kind of help us to some of the machines that I know, with the electric charges that you can do quickly. I know there's a lot of fear on what they can cost, but I'm also going to kind of challenge people to say, well, how much will it cost me if I don't come up with something to do a quick turnaround time?
So, and you were thinking about also, and then Bill, I wanted to talk about the cleaning buses. We talked about the electrostatic sprayer. Now, someone also asked about ultraviolet light. So put that in your thought, and I'll come back to you. Theresa, there's value in now having students literally like this is their seat, like every time they get on the bus. What's the value in that? And then the importance of also taking attendance and knowing who is on the bus.
Well, that's something we should know regardless if there is an accident or anything else. If you have RFID systems, obviously those are the best, so where you can do that. But you're also going to have to be prepared to say, Theresa was in seat 3 on the driver's side, because if, let's say that I was sick and something did develop, you're going to know immediately who was number 1 on that bus for notification, who was within all of those parameters that we really have to get as quickly as possible to watch.
Right.
So, that's absolutely imperative.
That's great. And this is the first time I've really heard about assigned seating in recent seminars, so that's great. Bill, cleaning the buses, how quickly can you turn these around? And just, you talked about electrostatic, talk a little bit about that. And also, I don't know, are you familiar with ultraviolet or anybody else on the panel?
Well, I'll speak to the ultraviolet first. And I would say that the ultraviolet is definitely, it's a viable way to kill the virus. That's my understanding. And I've done some reading on it. And I know some people that are working on projects in that, personally know them as project development. So I know that that is a proven method. I have not seen any products or any ways that would introduce that into the bus world, if you will. And I believe that's a more timely process. So I think that holds some hope in some applications. It'll be very interesting to see how that does or does not envelop into something that would be a pupil transportation option. Right now, I see the best option, and I'm not by any means an expert on cleaning buses, but I am learning a whole lot. And I would tell you that this electrostatic spray disinfecting machine seems to be the best way to go. And again, looking at paralleling industries that transport human beings, the airlines are using it, and subway and mass transit are using it. But I was made aware of this quite some time ago and actually ordered mine before school ended. So we have a couple of units coming, and then we ordered units to have in the building. So we're going to have a parallel cleaning system within the school facilities themselves and on the buses. So the beauty of these is to be able to move quickly through a bus cleaning.
So Bill, are you a big believer in sharing? Because I just got a notice from Trish who says that these electrostatic sprayers are there's a 4-month backlog.
They are on a backlog.
So,
and like I say, I've had my, well, as many things do, I think some or all of it comes from China, and they were obviously suffering the same problem we were. So, I'm told I will have mine in mid-June because I ordered them so early. So I have one on hand right now that I can get by with, but that is a big problem. And that's much of the discussion today, and within our work group and within the conversation that Brad and Jim had Tuesday, is you need to identify your supplies, custodial, PPE, cleaning supplies that you need, and get them ordered now to make sure you have them to start back in September. So we really have, not knowing, we have to shoot for September.
Right.
Someone just made a question about, could you put ultraviolet light bulbs in the overhead? I don't know. There's probably going to be something that's going to be there's going to be some great inventions, I think, that probably come out of this crisis, I'm sure. How about PPE? Rich, you're going to say something?
Yeah, just remember, Rick, anything we put inside a school bus has to be approved by the OEMs and by the regulatory agencies. So
Right.
even if they come up with something new and inventive at this point, the chances of it getting approved by any time before next year are very slim.
Very good point. Very good point.
Can I make a comment, Rick?
Yes,
and this
please.
is back to Bill's point. Bill did some research, made a decision, put the post in the ground, using his analogy, and bought the sprayers. Probably made the right decision, because we've heard those sprayers are being used, those foggers are being used throughout the state. But I want to say to people, again, trust yourself, do your research, get your supplies. You might make a mistake. You may buy something that in 6 months from now, we're going to say, oh, we shouldn't be doing that. But you know something, this is an unknown situation. Do the best you can do with the knowledge you have now. You can't be paralyzed. You have to do what you can to prepare yourself to get that opening done whenever that comes. And it may come July 1st, it may come in September, it may not come until January. But we have to move it along, move the process along. And that's part of what this committee is trying to do, is to do some research, come up with some best practices, come up with some ideas that can at least give you a starting point to be looking at things and trying to make some decisions. So,
Theresa, you look like
trust yourself.
Very
I was
good.
going to say, I think you always want to reach out also to see what are they doing in the buildings and in the classroom.
Yeah.
So are
Right.
those some things we can tap into? You know, also during this downtime, though, this is a perfect time to get caught up on your Medicaid and your Medicaid billing. You could use those funds, I do believe, to purchase some of these. Now, I know we're talking about availability, but at the same time, everybody goes, oh, the money type of thing. You know, see if there's grants or anything else out there. But again, you know, I like to live with, if you don't ask, the answer's always no. So even like David and Richard were saying, you've got to do your research, what's going to be best for your operation and for your student population. But, you know, potentially take a look at that and reach out to those schools and say, what are you doing in those classrooms? Do you have any extra resources that we could borrow? You know, how about some funding help in there?
That's great. That's great. And it did some feedback I'm seeing on these electrostatic machines is that they love it. Works great. Bill, I don't know if you want to talk about pricing. Some say they saw it anywhere from $700 to $1,400 a unit. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think I paid in the vicinity of maybe $7 or $7.50 per gun. But again, when you look at, you have to balance it all out and weigh it against your efficiencies. And that is a method that we can use in the buildings. And think of it this way, if I have 2 of those guns and one of them goes down and I need help, there's 5 more across the district. So, but it is, you got to benchmark that against the labor hours you're going to put into it, and how quickly can we move through these buses and ensure that they're properly disinfected.
Very good. Well, I can't, the time, we're already, I want you guys to give me a last takeaway, because I think it's really crucial to have you each be able to say one takeaway you want everybody to have, but we are running out of time. So I'm going to start with you, Bill. And then if you guys don't mind me putting you on the spot, maybe we can impanel you guys again at some point and revisit some of these topics, because number one, the task force will be further along. They may be, when they release that report. I'd love to bring Theresa back in, even though she's not a New Yorker. At heart, she is. I can sense it already.
Got it.
So I think there'll be some, if you guys are willing, I'll put you on the spot. But let's just, Bill, can you give me something that anybody who's listening to this webinar today, that the one critical thing that you hope that they take away with them? And then we'll go down from you to Rich, David, and Theresa. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think I'll give you another saying that my superintendent always uses. He says, we can have anything we want, we just can't have everything we want, right? So I think when we build these scenarios, you have to keep in mind that somehow the communication Dave said about being confident enough and forward thinking enough to take information up the ladder to let people know that, because if they don't know they can't have everything they want, they may ask for it and you can't deliver. So you know, carry the message forward, keeping in mind that we need to offer the options, and they being our district administration and school boards need to understand what we can and cannot do.
Very good. Hey, real quick question, because this is important. Is this equipment FEMA reimbursable? Someone asked that question. So is that possible?
I don't know. I would think not, but I guess I would not be the source to accurately answer that.
That just came in, so maybe worth looking into. Richard.
At NYAPT, we always talk about advocating with the legislature and things for bills and things that we want. But I think you need to take that same approach with your administration right now. You have to do your research, figure out what you think you need, and talk to them. Don't sit back and wait for them to come to you. You got to go up and advocate for what your needs are now. And if you need time to develop a plan based on when they decide classrooms are going to open and their new schedules, tell them that now. Don't wait. And like Bill said, put some stakes in the ground. Start buying equipment that you can buy now. We probably have budgets. I'm also a purchasing agent. We all have budgets that we probably haven't spent. We haven't run any buses since March. We probably have fuel money. We probably have other money that's available. Talk to your business people and start buying some of the stuff you need for next year. Now's the time to get started.
Excellent, excellent. David.
Yeah, I'll give you a little history. NYAPT was started by a few transportation directors years ago to share information. I think today it's probably as critical as ever that we band together to share information and try to find a way to the other side of this COVID-19 situation. I would encourage you to contact the committee members, and I will post those. Anyone on this panel, and send concerns or ideas if you're doing some unique thing to deal with this situation. Let us know. We'll make this part of the report, if you will. That'll be available to everybody. The power of this organization is the sharing of information among each other. You know, I've learned so much just sitting and listening to this panel work that, you know, I feel much more knowledgeable than when I started this process, and I'm sure that, you know, the same to the other panel members. So I would encourage you to do that. I think it makes all of us better, and there's nowhere else you're going to get that, right, other than, you know, with a bunch of school transportation people, be it with us or the other organizations or, again, the literature. So get yourself involved in this and be part of the solution.
Super. Thank you. And Theresa?
Well, a lot of it, I would say this is that great time to be doing our homework and our planning for it. Hopefully, like Rick said, you know, we can maybe do another session or some others, get a little bit more granular, you know, start to get to know what the students' needs are going to be on this bus, as well as all of your staff. We've got to take care of ourselves, because if we don't have anybody to drive the buses, we see exactly what's been happening. Also do our homework. You know, when we started thinking about it, it's like, I say plan extreme, because if you're ready for it and it doesn't happen, that's awesome. But we also always have to act prudently. You know, one of the thoughts is I want to make sure that we as an industry are safe in leading the way, because it would be horrible to hear that it's safer to go to Target, that they are cleaner, safer, taking more measures than we are as school districts transporting students, especially our special needs populations. So we really need to be careful about that. So those are the main things, and you know, I appreciate everybody letting me.
Great takeaway. I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that the response to our questions here, many of them have been just thank you for great information. I know you'll be getting an email back from David at some point, and Transfinder as well. We'll have this recorded, and you can find it off transfinder.com. We have the best practices page anchored right off of our homepage. But thank you, Theresa, Bill, Rich, David. What a great discussion. David, thank you for your leadership and NYAPT's leadership.
Thank you.
This time. I mean, New York State, hardest hit, and you guys have definitely been shown great leadership. And I did want to mention that if you hear about this task force and you want to make a suggestion, feel free to email Dave. Dave's got a very difficult email address to remember. It's dave@nyapt.org. So email Dave, and I'm sure he'll disseminate it to the rest of the task force. I want to encourage you to mark your calendars for May 28th. So it's every other week we meet with NYAPT to present our next webinar. It'll begin 1:00 p.m. I do want to mention once again, as Tony had mentioned, Stop Finder. It's a communications tool. It's free. Any district in North America for the rest of the calendar year, 2020, just email freestopfinder@transfinder.com. And finally, if you have a story that your district is doing to serve your community, we want to gather as many of those stories as possible. They will make their way into white papers. They've made their way into webinars. And as all the panelists have said, we're learning from each other. And so if somebody's doing something that's innovative that we can borrow and implement in our school district, we're all the better for it. So please email your stories to mystory@transfinder.com, and we will make sure that it gets added to our best practices page and maybe a webinar. And with that, I just want to say thank you once again for all the attendees for coming, for the panelists for just great insights, and I just hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.